I was recently challenged to create a spell sling, a spellcaster who uses the sling as a weapon in conjunction. I was really excited about this build, and as I got started, I wanted to take the magic stone cantrip. This is going to increase the damage and change our damage type to wisdom. However, oddly enough, the range on just throwing a magic stone is somehow better than the range if you're using a sling. So the build ended up being better by just dropping the sling and focusing on throwing my magic stones. Now, interestingly enough, once I dropped that sling, I ended up falling in love with the flavor of the build I came up with, and that's the build I'm bringing you today. This is the Meteor Master. To start off this build, I actually want to start with our flavor profile because it's going to inform everything else we do. This build is more about the flavor than it is about the mechanics. Now, the flavor I wanted to go for is something alien, something from outer space. So the idea I have for this is that we are a swarmkeeper, and our swarm are asteroids or meteors, and they just float around us as if we're a celestial body. So ultimately, they're just small rocks that rotate around us as if we are a planet, and they are our moons. The cool thing about this is when we mix it with magic stone, our primary cantrip, we just touch a couple of our meteors and then we launch them. Of course, we have to have an empty hand to represent us throwing them, but flavor speaking, we are just shifting the gravity of these stones rotating around us and launching them at our enemies. So this is a swarmkeeper that its flavor is going to be alien, is going to be focused on space, and is going to be focused on gravity manipulation. Now, past that, moving into our goals and limitations, our limitation is simply that we need to be a magic stone focused build. It's a pretty simple limitation today, but we're going to go ahead and move on to the meat of the build, starting with the lineage. I went with the Astral Elf. The main reason I did this is because I liked the flavor of a space elf with my space build. But on top of that, we get all the amazing elf things. We get resistance to the charmed condition, we get dark sight, we get half as long rest, but we also come with a kind of phase step like, it's called Starlight Step. It's just Misty Step as a bonus action that doesn't cost us a spell. Always amazing. We also come with a cantrip, and I chose the light cantrip specifically because I like the imagery of us touching one of our rotating rocks and having it pressurize and create like a little mini sun that we can then launch to see light from many different angles, or launch it, down a dark path, whatever we want to do with it. That's a cool way of representing it. Now, when it comes to our stats, we are going to be wisdom primary, constitution secondary, but we're going to want to take an odd here because we have a half feat we're going to be picking up. And then we're going to have dexterity as our tertiary, but it needs to be at least 14 for our medium armor. As for our leveling structure, we are going to be going all 20 levels into Swarmkeeper. Now, moving into the key ideas, let's talk about levels 1 through 4. Right out of the gate, we're going to get medium armor and shield, so we're going to have decent AC. We're also a wisdom and dexterity focused character who also has resistance to the charmed condition, so our save defense is also quite high, so we're coming out the gate with good defenses. As discussed, our main weapon is going to be Magic Stone, which we're going to be picking up at 2nd level with our fighting style, the Druidic Warrior. Now, this build is going to be focused on maximizing wisdom, which means for a ranger, we actually have really good spell casting, and rangers come with some great spells. Specifically, their first level spell that really stands out to me is Entangle. Entangle is a crazy good fight winning spell that really scales well for a first level spell, and because we're focused on our wisdom, it's going to be much harder to save than an average ranger's would be. Now, as for the flavor of Entangle, I want it to be pressurized gravity, that we are just creating a field of really intense gravity that is either going to completely suppress an enemy or just creates difficult terrain. At level 4, we're going to pick up the Crusher feat. This is going to round out our constitution and gives us some forced movement. Crusher synergizes surprisingly well with Gathered Swarm. Gathered Swarm gives us the ability to potentially move enemies 15 feet in one direction, and then Crusher can move them again 5 feet in whatever direction we want from there. So this means that we can move them through more damaging areas, or we can plant them very specifically right in the middle of control effects such as Entangle. So our first turn might look like action, cast a fight winning spell, bonus action, set up our magic stones. On the next turn, we're going to attack with our magic stones, and then we can set up our magic stones again. We want to set up magic stones with our bonus action whenever we can, because some turns we won't be able to. An example of this is maybe we want to cast Hunter's Mark. If we cast Hunter's Mark, we still want to have those 2 available magic stones. This is also a good time to mention that our range is medium specific. Even though our Gathered Swarm ability allows us to have forced movement on ourselves that doesn't proc opportunity attacks, we have to hit in order to make that happen. So if we have someone pressuring us in melee, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to hit them, and we don't have Shillelagh to use our wisdom. So melee combat is a weakness of this build. We're going to want to make sure we take a rapier or something so we can at least defend ourselves a little bit if we're forced into melee combat. Similarly, is our range is really only effective out to 60 feet. So we don't have great 120 feet or greater ranges. So really long ranged combat is also another one of our weaknesses. Our bread and butter is to be a mid-field controller, and that's really what we're going to focus on. So I want to talk a little bit about flavor. So we are a gravity controller. So when I'm hitting them with Gathered Swarm, I'm not thinking the rocks are like picking them up and moving them over. What I'm thinking is when we hit them with one of our rocks, it shifts the gravity for them and they actually fall 15 feet in that direction, and then they get their footing there at the end. Similar to Crusher, that we are just gravity manipulating the situation. Whatever we're doing, I just want to represent that as this gravity field. Moving into our mid levels, at level 5 specifically, we really increase our strength. Number 1 is we get extra attack. That's always fantastic with a martial. More importantly, however, is we get spike growth and we get web. Spike growth is going to really increase our damage output as well as our control, and web is just a fantastic control spell that we can continually force people to make that save over and over again, planting them right in the middle of the web. This is where our control damaging playstyle really starts to shine. Again, focusing a little bit on the flavor notes for spike growth, I'm not thinking the spikes grow out of the ground. What I'm thinking is that we just kind of lift a bunch of stones that kind of float there and spin, and as they're going through, they just get ground down by these floating, spinning stones. So it's more of a gravity field still. Similar with web, I don't want it to be webs, I want it to be intense gravity that's keeping people restrained and making it hard to move out of it. So what we built here is a fairly typical Swarmkeeper. The only difference is instead of focusing on archery, we changed it to magic stone. So instead of dexterity, we're focused on wisdom, which does make our Swarmkeeper abilities harder to resist, which is very good. However, the sacrifice we give up for this is some of our damage output along with some range, but we have an increase in control as payment. More important than any of this though, I just really love the flavor of this build. With D&D builds, I really don't get into alien or space very often, so that was something I was really excited about, and I think the image of us just shifting the gravity and launching these stones from around us as if we're an astral body is really dope, and that's what I was most excited about with this build. Now, if you were given the same prop, basically a magic stone build, what would you build? Additionally, if you were to do a alien flavor or a space flavor build, what would you do? Let me know in the comments down below. I want to give a shout out to one of our newest Patreons, Rav. Rav is a total baller, and thank you so much for supporting this channel. If you are interested in showing support to the channel as well as getting some awesome benefits along the way, consider checking out our Patreon. But with that, my friends, I hope you have yourselves an incredible day, and I'll catch you on the next one. See you then.